All right, so I'm going to try to go through and talk to you guys about this. This is actually the second time I'm recording it, so a lot of the stuff's already highlighted. And rather than go back and re-highlighting and everything, I'm just going to show you what's there and kind of model through and talk it through with you. So your assignment is going to be for first quarter. You're going to try to write a narrative. So what is a narrative? It's a fancy word for story, right? Now you're going to write a short story. The most important piece of writing advice that I can give you prior to starting your writing is you have to follow the directions. Okay, imagine your family came to you and said, "Hey, I need you to clean your room." And you washed and waxed the cars and you did all the dishes and you made dinner and then you took the dog for a walk. And you're going to come back and say, "I'm done." And they're going to say, "No, you failed." But why? You did all these great things. They're going to be happy with you and they're going to be pleased, but they're still going to say, "Well, you still didn't pass because you didn't clean your room." So make sure when you're writing, if they ask you to write a summary, you write a summary. If you're asked to use text evidence, you use text evidence. If you are supposed to write a persuasive essay, then it's a persuasive essay. In this case, you are writing a narrative. You're writing a short story. So make sure it's a summary or not. Make sure it's not a summary. Make sure it's an actual story. Now, obviously, it's going to be about hiking in the Grand Canyon. So I already went through and highlighted this stuff here in blue. Now, to highlight a Google Doc, what you do is you take your cursor, you click and drag over what you're going to highlight. You click the little highlighter tab, and then you pick the color you want. Now it's going to ask you to highlight in yellow for the words, but you can for this first part highlight whatever you want. If you want to get rid of highlighting, you click and drag over it, click the highlighter, and then click none. So that's how you highlight. So directions. Your school writing club is creating an online magazine that is a collection of fictional stories about the great outdoors. Now, fictional, what does that mean? It means not real. So these are not real stories, right? They are made up, which means they're going to have characters, they're going to have dialogue, they're going to have a conflict, but they didn't actually happen. You choose to write a story that is several paragraphs long to include in the online magazine. For your story, imagine that you are hiking in Grand Canyon National Park. In your story, tell about an exciting adventure that you will have during your hike. Now, let me tell you about why I highlighted what I did in this first paragraph. It's fictional, it needs to be not real. So if you say, "Well, I've never been to the Grand Canyon," perfect, because that's not a requirement. If you have been to the Grand Canyon, you have an advantage, but it's supposed to be made up, right? And if you write me a story of the time you went to the Grand Canyon in third grade, and it's true, you failed because it's supposed to be made up. It's going to be about the great outdoors. I highlighted that because if you've been into the outdoors before, you have an advantage. You kind of know some of the dangers, some of the excitement, what it sounds like, what it feels like, potentially what it tastes like, right? You know a lot of those sensory experiences. I highlighted several paragraphs long because it makes it obvious to me that one paragraph is probably not enough. Two, maybe, but probably not. But also 4 pages, probably too much. So we're looking for several paragraphs. It should be about hiking in Grand Canyon National Park, not about rafting, not about flying over it, not about visiting the swamp, not about going to Disneyland. Hiking is the activity, Grand Canyon National Park is the setting. In your story, tell about an exciting adventure that you would have during your hike. So, like all stories, it should be exciting, it should be interesting. The online magazine will be read by parents, teachers, and other students in your school. When writing your story, find ways to use information and details from the sources to improve your story. Make sure you develop your characters, the setting, and the plot. Use details, dialogue, and description where appropriate. So, looking at this paragraph, first, the wrong way to highlight is to highlight everything, to just click the whole paragraph and highlight it all. That's very rarely the right way to use a highlighter. You want to highlight stuff that's important. So, why did I highlight what I did? Parents, teachers, and other students in your school, that tells me the audience. So, I know that I'm not writing a children's book. I'm not trying to aim this at 4-year-olds. Okay, so I can use a little more complicated vocabulary, um, but I know it's for school, so it should be school appropriate. That's another important piece for this for my audience. I know that I should use information and details from the sources. So there should be words and phrases that I'm pulling out to put into my story, and that's really our target for today. I should develop the characters, setting, and the plot. I should use details, dialogue, and description where appropriate. Now, we're going to talk in great depth about characters and about traits and developing them. We're going to talk about setting. We're going to talk more about plot. We're going to talk more about details. We're going to talk more about dialogue. We're going to talk more about description. So these things will come, but that's what makes a good story. So what to do? Read the four articles below several times. So there are four sources. Okay. If you'd like to use text to speech, if you want to have them read to you through Google Read and Write, you can watch this video. I'm going to make you actually go click this though and watch it on your own. Highlight in yellow 20 descriptive words and phrases and 5 facts you plan on using in your story. And then begin writing your story on page 7. We are really only going to be doing this today. We're not going to start writing yet. So that's it. Learning target for today is to just understand descriptive words and phrases and be able to pull those out. Now, virtual tour. You should have already watched this, at least a few minutes of it. If you want to continue playing it in the background as you write later, you can. But if you've never been to the Grand Canyon, this will show you what does it look like and also what does it sound like. And then you should have also already looked at this example Grand Canyon story. So you should have already done these two things. Once you've looked at this video and you kind of get that visual context, okay, what's the Grand Canyon? What does it look like? And you see the writing example, okay, what am I trying to create? You have a huge advantage over students that have not done that, okay, because essentially they're putting all those words into pictures, and then you're also getting to see a finished product. That gives you a tremendous advantage over a student that doesn't have those things. So use those, use them both, look at them, read them. Okay, so source 1. Now, I told you I've already gone through and highlighted it. So I highlighted in yellow stuff that I thought was important. And I'm going to go through and talk about why I highlighted it. So this article is from Appleseeds Magazine. It's about the formation of the Grand Canyon. The 3 R's of Folding Time, Grand Canyon Style by Lee Anderson. There is a place like no other in the world where time seems to fold in on itself, where the past meets the here and now, mountains meet oceans, beauty meets danger, and discovery meets mystery. This place is the Grand Canyon. Now, you can see here I highlighted a whole sentence. I just did that because I really, really liked it. I thought it was really beautifully written and descriptive, and so I highlighted the whole thing. The wrong way to highlight, again, is to do select everything, select what you want to highlight, click your highlighter. We're using yellow. It's pretty rare that you'd want to highlight a whole paragraph, and for our purposes, we definitely don't want to do that. So how do you unhighlight? Click, drag, and copy, and highlight the what's, or select the text that you don't want to highlight and select none. So the Grand Canyon is 277 river miles long. I don't care about that because I know I'm writing about hiking, not about river rafting. At certain points, it's more than a mile deep and as much as 18 miles wide. I might care about being 18 miles wide if I'm going to do hiking. Going 50 miles per hour would take over 5 hours to drive its entire length. At such speed, you'd hardly see any of what makes the canyon truly grand. Dazzling, glittering colors, fossils and wildlife, a great river snaking through, rock and many layered canyon walls, giving glimpses of Earth's history. Okay, now, always try to keep it small. What's the only thing you need to do here? You need to highlight 20 descriptive words and phrases and 5 facts. So where's the really good descriptive words and phrases that we might be able to use in paragraph 2? Dazzling. Click, drag, highlight. I love that one. Glittering colors. Love that one. That's descriptive. Fossils and wildlife, maybe. So since it's a maybe, I'm going to highlight it. I like this word, snaking. It gives me a really good visual. Okay. So I'm highlighting words that I think, hey, that could sound really cool in a story. Geologists have many different ideas about how and when the Grand Canyon was formed. The story of the canyon's beginnings is like a jigsaw puzzle with many pieces missing. There are a few things geologists do agree on. We call them the 3 R's: rocks, river, and erosion. Actually, erosion, but we're going to cheat a bit. This paragraph, I didn't really see anything. I thought, that's a really cool word for my story. Now, if you're thinking about a story where you're hiking with geologists, you probably want to highlight some of this stuff. If you're thinking that your hike is going to be to solve some kind of scientific question, you might want to highlight this stuff. There's no right or wrong way to highlight, except you should not highlight entire paragraphs. Okay, that is wrong. And if you read 4 pages and you've only highlighted 2 words, either it's a terrible source for what you're trying to work on, or maybe you needed to read it a little more closely. So, rocks. The Grand Canyon's walls are made up mainly of 3 types of rock: limestone, sandstone, and shale. Over thousands of years, the rock built up layer by layer. Each new layer of rock pressed down on the layers beneath it. Then the Colorado River began to cut through these layers like a knife, exposing them for us to see. At the Grand Canyon today, 18 or more layers of Earth's history are laid out for us to see. We can see backward in time. The rocks near the top of the canyon are very old, but those toward the bottom of the canyon are thought to be over 6 times older. What an amazing place for scientists to study the history of Earth. Now, this kind of starts getting confusing because they got these 3 dots. These are ellipses. It means they left out information. And then these little parentheses looking things means that they're including words that weren't there in the original text. And you might look at this and go, this kind of stinks. This doesn't make any sense. I don't like this at all. You have to remember, just focus on what's the task at hand. You're trying to find 20 descriptive words and 5 phrases you like. If you don't like any of the words there and it makes no sense, just keep on reading because you're just looking for words that describe the Grand Canyon. Limestone, sandstone, and shale. Each of these types of rock was formed in a different way. Limestone is made from the fossilized skeletons of tiny organisms that lived in ancient seas. Now, you're going to see I highlighted the word ancient. So that to me, that's a great way to describe like these really old rocks, but really it's more interesting than really old. You'll also see it appears quite a few times. Fossils are the super hard remains of plants or animals. Now, you might want to highlight fossils. This depends on where your story is going to go. If your story is that you are getting lost on your hike, fossils might not be important, right? If that's your conflict. If your story is that on your hike you make an amazing discovery of an unknown dinosaur species, you probably want to use the word fossils. So you want to highlight words that are descriptive that will help you write the story that you want to write. Sandstone is actually sand pressed so hard over thousands of years that it's stuck together into rock, and shale is basically mud left over from the bottoms of ancient lakes and marshes. Some rock is softer, some is harder, and they erode at different rates. When a layer of hard rock is on top of a layer of softer rock, amazing cliffs are created. Now, cliffs, I don't really care about the rock type. That's something I could certainly see in a story, right? Pretty obvious. How could cliffs create conflict? I bet you can all brainstorm something there. River. Without the Colorado River, there would be no Grand Canyon. The river flows southwest from the Rocky Mountains to the Gulf of California, crossing through an area called the Colorado Plateau. As it flows, the river crosses Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada before flowing into Mexico and the Gulf. But the ancient Colorado was not the same river we know today. In fact, long ago, it was probably more than one river. When those ancient rivers joined, the newly formed Colorado began flowing southwest. It bucked over dangerous rapids and frothed like chocolate milk in a blender as it carried mountains of dirt downstream. Like sandpaper repeatedly rubbing the same piece of wood, the fast-moving sand-filled water slowly carved a groove in the rock beneath it. I loved this one because it's imagery, right? Bucked over dangerous rapids and frothed like chocolate milk. It's got some figurative language. It's really descriptive, right? I didn't like the part about it's shale, it's limestone, but this to me kind of made me feel like I was there, which is why I highlighted it. Same with this. Fast moving sand filled water. That's what it used to look like. Now, those are some terms that seem to be more interesting. But the Colorado River didn't carve the canyon by itself. As ancient glaciers melted, the river and its tributaries flooded again and again. Now, I'm going to show you a trick. Tributaries. I'm not going to highlight it. I actually don't know what that means. I do know what it means, but if you don't know, you highlight it and then you right click, or if you're using a Chromebook, 2-finger tap. It says define tributaries. It will tell you off to the side. A tributary is a noun. It's a river or stream flowing in a larger river or lake. Okay, so it's like little rivers flowing in a big one. So you can do that for any word you see. Okay, you don't know what a glacier is? Highlight it, right click it, define glaciers. Oh, use the dictionary. It's not showing up for this one for whatever reason. Well, let's see if we can define glacier. I bet we can find that one. And it could just be that my computer's running really slow because my laptop's not the best. But that will typically work for words. The floods cleared away the sand, gravel, and other sediment at the bottom of the river, and then rocks and boulders which had tumbled into the river were able to grind and scrape the bedrock at the river's bottom, further deepening the canyon. Now, I saw cliffs before. Now I'm seeing rocks and boulders that are tumbling down. Starting to see some problems I could throw into my story. As water moves through the canyon, it flows downhill, dropping in elevation. This makes the water flow faster with more power to carve out the rock. Also, long ago, the land around the Colorado River began to rise bit by bit, bubbling upward like a giant blister. Known as uplift, this process continued over many years. Uplift helped form the canyon we know today. Do I care about uplift for my story? Probably not. What do you think the Colorado River today? Now, this is going to be more interesting, I think, because it's modern Colorado River. Today, the Glen Canyon and Hoover Dams tightly control the Colorado River. The river now runs more slowly. Floods no longer sweep away the sediment at the bottom of the river. The river bottom sediment is 75 feet deep in some places. Because of the slower water and the thick blanket of sediment, the carving of the canyon has slowed down. Erosion. When rain falls on rocks, water seeps into the cracks in the rock. When the weather gets cold and that water freezes, okay, now, there is a phrase that I'm going to highlight. Pretty obvious, I bet. If I'm going on a hike and I know the Grand Canyon gets cold and it can freeze, how could that create a problem for me that could be interesting to tell in a story? It expands or gets bigger. Over and over, water freezes and expands in the cracks, and slowly the rocks split apart. Pieces of broken rock, from tiny to huge, fall into the canyon below. As they fall, they might hit another rock and send it tumbling too. When they finally reach bottom, some rocks are carried away by the Colorado and others remain where they landed. So I highlighted it because I liked it for the story that I'm thinking about writing. Heavy rains send great slabs of sediment. All right, I like that. Heavy rains. Great slabs. I like that one. Mud and rock crashing down cliff faces widen. I'm not going to highlight cliff because I already have that word from earlier. But there's no reason you couldn't if you wanted to do cliffs again. Widening the canyon and carving new shapes into giant red walls. The Colorado's tributaries are busy too, carving smaller side canyons. Sometimes these side canyons erode into each other, further widening the canyon. This is all part of the process of rocks, river, and erosion that makes this canyon so grand. Now, if you don't understand how the Grand Canyon's formed, you don't need to, because go back to the directions. Always go back to the directions. What are you doing? You are writing a story about hiking in the Grand Canyon National Park. It needs to be an exciting adventure, okay? And you're really just trying to highlight 20 descriptive words and phrases. So if you don't understand that science bit, you don't need to. So let's go on to source 2. This article from Appleseeds Magazine is about how to take a nature walk. The article talks about John Muir, a man who loved nature and encouraged leaders to preserve land in the United States so people could enjoy its natural beauty for many years. The article explains what John Muir did on a nature hike. One place that he loved to explore was the land that is now known as Yosemite National Park. Now, this one right here, I know it's going to apply because this is about how to go on a hike. So it might not be about the Grand Canyon, but I'm going to think about, okay, if I'm going on a hike, what can I take away from this? Follow in Muir's footsteps, Take a Nature Walk by Michelle Schaub. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks. John Muir. From the steamy swamps of Florida to the icy glaciers of Alaska, John Muir loved exploring wild places. Now, steamy swamps, super descriptive. Why would I not highlight that? So I'm trying to describe the Grand Canyon. What does steamy swamps describe? Florida. Doesn't work. Icy glaciers, great description, but problem, it describes Alaska. So I wouldn't highlight those ones because they don't tell me about the Grand Canyon. Wherever he went, he carried a notebook to describe the wonders he discovered. You don't have to walk 1,000 miles to follow in Muir's footsteps. You can connect with nature by taking a simple walk and recording your observations in a journal. I highlighted journal not because it's a super descriptive word, but I like the idea. Maybe I could work that into my story. So John Muir says, he said, just follow these steps. Pick a wild place, a nature trail, arboretum, a place where you can see special trees, park, or even your own backyard. Now, let's try it again. Highlight, right click, define arboretum. So you get a definition over here. So just remember that tool is available to you. There are also many Chrome add-ons where the Chrome browser will read this to you. Right? There's all kinds of Chrome stuff that you can utilize, and don't be afraid to use those tools. So pick a wild place. 2, bring a notebook, large enough to fit your writings and drawings, but small enough to carry comfortably. Well, if you have this notebook that's super important, how could that turn into a story? Maybe you could lose the notebook. Right? There's an idea. Pack a snack. While John Muir brought only tea and bread on some of his journeys, you might want to pack a tastier treat. Just remember not to litter. Now, I highlighted that one because I was kind of thinking about plot. And you could lose a notebook, but what if you didn't bring a snack? How could that complicate your hike? That could lead to a problem. Be alert. I highlighted the word alert because if you've ever been out in the woods, you know you become more attuned to sounds and things that happen that maybe you're not used to. And so maybe you hear something that, causes you to be alert. Let the sights, sounds, smells, and textures of nature fill your senses. Look high and low. Notice the big picture, like landscapes and trees, but also the little details, like flower petals and insect wings. So I highlighted that. Flower petals, insect wings. It was just a cool description. Write it down. Use plenty of description to record your observations. Add your thoughts, feelings, and questions. Don't forget to put the date, time, and location on each entry. I'm going to highlight thoughts and feelings just because it's important to have that in a story. We should know what the characters think and how they feel. Add drawings. Muir filled his journals with sketches of the plants and animals he encountered. Sketching will help you focus on details you might otherwise miss. Collect plants. Try placing flowers and leaves between the pages of your journal, just like Muir did. Number 9, take pictures. If you can't collect plants where you're hiking, take pictures and tape them into your journal instead. 10, learn more. Did you observe something on your walk that sparked your interest? A bird's feather? A strange fungus? Use the descriptions and drawings in your journal to look up more information. Next time you take a walk in a wild place, you'll be a keen nature observer. Now, this kind of gives me some other ideas for a conflict, like maybe you make some kind of cool discovery. But just remember, stick to the task at hand. What are you doing? You're highlighting words that you like the sound of. You're highlighting facts that you seem like could make it into a story. So you're going to do that with source 3. Okay, and I actually highlighted the first part for you. This article from Appleseeds Magazine is about hiking in the Grand Canyon. Take a Hike by Kathy Ann M. Kowalski. So you're going to highlight words you like and facts that are important. Each year, more than 250 hikers need assistance at the Grand Canyon. Not going to read the rest of the article, but I would want to know why, how do they get assistance, what problems do they run into. So you're going to go through here and just highlight, right? Select the text you like. Click the highlight color. You're going to use yellow. If you don't like the text you selected, do that. Hit none. Right? On the trail do's and don'ts, you're going to read source 4. This article from Appleseeds Magazine is about preserving the Grand Canyon, how to be a green traveler. So you're going to look for words that you like the description of or phrases you think are helpful. And then down at the bottom, okay, you can see I've already added 3 for you, already given you a start. You're going to have 20 descriptive words or phrases you plan to use in your short story. And you're going to list out 5 facts you plan to include. So, and you can delete these if you don't like them. Okay. John Muir says you should pack a snack and be alert to things around you. Maybe I want to put that in my story. If you don't like these words, you can delete them and you can put something else in there if you want. Instead of snaking, delete it and put something else in there. But this will give you a context of what does this place look like? How can we describe it? What are some neat facts to help you write your story? So I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching this. Remember, you can rewatch, you know, the Grand Canyon video to see what it looks like. You can always go back and look at that um, example from a student. Okay, but just keep your task one thing at a time. You need to read source 3 and 4, highlight words and phrases you like, highlight 5 facts, and then you're going to write them down on this list. And that's it for language arts today.